All right, my amazing artists. Now that we have learned all about contrast and especially size contrast, we are going to create our drawing inspired by our artist. So we want to make this look like there is a huge whale under the surface of the water that's coming up to sort of investigate a boat that is sailing just on the surface. So the first thing we want to do is we want to divide our paper into two sections. One is going to be the sky and one is going to be the water. We want the water section to be very, very big because we want a nice big whale underneath the water. So go to the top of your paper and just a little bit further down, just make a line that kind of goes across. This is going to be the water, so it doesn't need to be perfectly straight. It can be a little bit wavy. And we want to make it that's about 2 inches from the top. Okay. That'll give us just enough space to draw our sailboat and then plenty of room to draw our whale. So we're actually going to start our whale in the bottom right-hand corner of our paper. So we're just going to go to this bottom right-hand corner and we're going to make a diagonal line, just like that. Okay. Now from this diagonal line, I'm going to make a line that curves up on each side, like I'm making a capital letter D that doesn't touch in the middle. Just like that. See that? So if I were to touch that, it'd look like a capital letter D, but it's open. And then I'm going to bring these two corners up, just like that. So now we have the start of our tail, but a whale's tail actually comes in here. So I'm going to go right here to the center, and I'm going to just kind of a little bit above this line, make a little dot. And then from that dot, I'm going to curve over and curve over. And now we're going to erase this line, which is why we're doing this in pencil to begin with. So now it looks like a whale's tail, okay? All right, the next step is to draw our whale's body. Now we want to make this a huge whale that fills up this space. So we're going to start at the tail and we're going to go all the way up to this corner of our paper, and we're going to touch or come very close to touching the surface of the water. So we want to just curve over a little bit because our whale is going to be wider at the top of his body. So I'm going to start here, my tail, and I'm going to come up and back. So it's a nice curve line. And you may have to practice that just a few times to get it the way you want it. And we can always erase once we draw the other side if we think it's a little bit too thin or we need to make this area wider. Okay. Now we're going to go from the nose and we're going to curve and back to the tail. So we're going to have a little sort of belly here on the whale. I'm going to start here. I'm going to come around and I'm going to curve down and then come back. Okay, it's just a simple fish shape right now. It doesn't really look like a whale yet. And then this is where you can kind of fix anything that you need to fix. So I'm going to actually make this a little bit wider on my tail to connect. Okay. And again, if you don't like your shape, just go back and fix it and erase what you don't need. So now I'm going to come up to this part of the whale and I'm going to make the mouth. Whales have very large mouths. So we're going to make a line that goes down pretty far down the body. That way they can scoop up a lot of organisms in the water, a lot of kale and things in the water. Okay, and then I'm going to make a little bump that goes down and then another line that goes back. So it looks like a stretched out Z. So a long line for the mouth, bump that goes down, and a line that goes back. And then right above this, I'm going to make my whale's eye. So we're just going to make an oval with another oval inside. Okay, so far so good. Now we're going to make our fins, okay? So we want to make a small pectoral fin. We want to make a fin that comes off the side here. And we also want to make a little bump where our blowhole is going to be, okay? So the pectoral fin, you can just do anywhere kind of back here. Just make a little bump that comes up and down. Same thing for the blowhole bump, somewhere near the eye. I'm gonna make a smaller one of those. And then for this fin, it's gonna be a little bit different. So we're gonna make a fin right here behind the eye. First, I'm gonna make a line that curves down and goes past the body. And then I'm going to make a little U shape at the bottom. And then I want it to curve back up right next to this one. Leave some space. So curve up, a little space, and then connect. Just like that. All right, now the last step is to erase the lines that we don't need, and then just to add some detail, not too much on our whale because we are going to use our crayons or markers or watercolors, but we want to add just a little bit of detail on our whale. So I'm going to erase this line here in my fin. I'm going to erase this little line here. And I'm just going to retrace that a little bit so you can see that's the blowhole. I'm going to erase this line here for this fin. And then I'm going to go back and I'm going to make some lines like this because we're imitating our artist who made a blue whale. So make some lines like this. Okay, that's the basic shape for our whale. Now above the surface of the water, we want to show that the whale is investigating a little boat. So right here on the surface water, we're just going to make a little sailboat. So we're going to start with a nice curved bottom of our boat, just sort of touching the surface of the water. And remember, we want this to be a smaller scale. We want this to be contrasting. So I'm just making a very tiny curve of a boat. And then I'm going to make a line to connect. And then I'm going to make my sail. So you make a line going up the center and a triangle on this side. And then on this side, we're going to make a curved triangle. So I'm going to take the line and I'm going to curve and bring it back. And then I'm going to do that again right next to it. Curve, bring it back. Okay. And that is the basics of our picture. Now, if you're doing watercolor, this may be as far as you want to do because you're going to do most of your textures and details with your watercolor. If you have decided or you have certain materials at home like crayons or markers, if you decided to use those, then you can add more details. It's a lot easier to add details when you're using those materials. So maybe you want to add some more fish in the water. Maybe you want to add another whale. If you look at the example next to me, she has 2 whales. Maybe you want to put a little person sort of hanging out the boat. Maybe you want to add a curved line here to look like the sun is rising or setting. So if you have markers or crayons or colored pencils, go ahead and add some more details. You also have a choice right now if you want to trace your drawing. You can trace it with black Sharpie or crayon as always before you do any coloring. That usually works best when you are doing crayons or markers or colored pencils, just taking your black and tracing it first so you can see it and see your drawing a little clearer. If you're using watercolor, you have a choice whether or not you want to trace. What I'm actually going to do is I'm going to paint mine, and then I'm going to go back and look at it and decide if I want to add marker on top of it once it's dry. So you can do that if you don't want to trace it now and you want to color it in or you want to paint it and see what it looks like first, you can do that. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm actually going to sign my name with a Sharpie, or you can use your crayon. before I start my coloring. That way I don't have to go back and worry about it. Now, if you are using crayon or marker color pencil, you can go ahead and start coloring. Try to look at our inspiration artwork and see where she colors some areas darker and some areas lighter. And you may want to try to do that with your materials. Maybe do a dark blue crayon down here on the belly of the whale and try a lighter blue crayon on top. If you are going to be painting yours, she likes to use a technique called wet and wet. So I just want to show you that technique really quickly for those that are choosing to paint. So wet and wet technique, it sounds very much what it is. You take your water and you wet your paper in a little section and you just kind of spread it out just like that. Then you dip your brush into your chosen color. So I'm just going to use this sort of purplish blue color here. And you just touch the brush to the water and you let it spread through that water that's on your paper. So you see how that's spreading around and sort of creating this interesting texture. And you can also mix colors. So I could go and I could take a little bit of another color like this purple and I could sort of touch that in and let that spread. But you want to do this, if you're going to do this technique, you want to do it in sections because it will start to dry quickly. So you don't want to paint the whole paper with water and then try to go back and do it because it'll be dry by the time you get to the next corner. You also want to keep in mind that you don't want to touch it too much. You don't want to keep touching a wet piece of paper because eventually it'll start to tear. So you just want to do one little corner, one little area, and let that spread. And then you just want to leave it alone for a few minutes, let it dry, and then you can come back to it if you want to add some more color. Okay. She also did a little bit of dripping in her water, which she really just achieved by picking up the paper slightly as it's wet. And then I can show you on camera what happens is this starts to roll down and makes these drip marks. You can see when I put this back down, those drips. So that's how she got that look in her paintings. Okay. So those of you who are using your watercolors, you can try those techniques and make your picture look like our artists that we studied. All right, my amazing artists, go ahead and color your pictures with whatever materials you have.
Unicornio espacial, volando por las estrellas, entregando los arcos iris por todo el mundo. Unicornio espacial, brillando en la noche, sonrisas y abrazos para siempre por todo el mundo. Tan puro de corazón y fuerte de la mente, tan buena de puntería con su láser malvavisco. Volando por las estrellas, entregando los arcos iris por todo el mundo. Entregando los arcos iris. Entregando los arcos iris. Entregando los arcos iris. Entregando los arcos iris.
All right, my amazing artists, I hope you enjoyed making your whale. If yours is wet, remember to let it dry before you try to move it around, and even let it dry before you try to add any markers or lines to it if you decide you want to add some outline after you've painted it. I hope you enjoyed this project. I can't wait to see your amazing surfacing whales.